Dean Martin wasn't just a singer or an actor. He was a whole mood. Cool, calm, and always collected. He ruled Hollywood with a drink in his hand and a joke on his lips. But behind that easy charm was a life full of pain, loss, and quiet suffering. He climbed to the top, but the price he paid was heavy. From a complicated love life to the tragic death of his son and later his beloved wife, Dean's story turned from glamorous to gut-wrenching. Join us as we take a deep look at the man behind the legend, his life, his love, and the sorrow that followed leading up to his own death in 1995. The boy from Steubenville. Dean Martin was not always Dean Martin. He was born Dino Paul Crocchetti on June 7, 1917 in Steubenville, Ohio. His family came from Italy. His father, Gaetano Croetti, worked as a barber and his mother, Angela, was born in Ohio to Italian parents. Dino grew up in a house where only Italian was spoken. In fact, he didn't learn English until he was 5 years old. Because of this, Dino had a rough time in school. He couldn't speak English well, so other kids bullied him. His early school years were hard. He felt different. Later, he said that school just wasn't for him. He once joked, "I had a bicycle and I never missed a meal, but I was just too smart for those teachers in school." That line made people laugh, but it also said something deeper. He didn't feel like he fit in. By the time he reached the 10th grade, he had enough. He dropped out of school and left the classroom behind for good. That decision took him down a very different path. One filled with hard work, risks, and rough jobs. Fighting for a future. After leaving school, Dino, fighting for a future, tried to follow in his father's footsteps. His dad wanted him to become a barber. But Dino had other ideas. He worked many small jobs to get by. Gas station helper, milkman, and even drugstore clerk. But these jobs didn't excite him. What caught his attention was boxing. Dino started fighting under the name Kid Crochet. It was a tough way to earn money. He said he fought in 12 matches and won all but 11, which means he only won one. Even though he didn't win much, the experience left physical marks. He got a broken nose, a scarred lip, and shattered knuckles because he couldn't even afford the hand wraps that boxers usually used. But Dean wasn't just fighting in the ring. When he moved to New York City, he lived with another struggling entertainer named Sonny King. Both young men were chasing dreams, but they needed money to survive. So, they came up with an unusual plan. They turned their small apartment into a kind of underground fight club. They charged people to watch them bare-knuckle box right there in their living room. The fights would go on until someone got knocked out. Dean even knocked out Sonny in the first round of a real match once, but deep down he knew this wasn't the life he wanted. Getting beat up every day wasn't a real future. He needed a change, but he didn't know what yet. From smoke-filled rooms to singing on stage. From smoke-filled rooms to singing on stage. After giving up boxing, Dino still had to find work. He ended up in a place just as shady, a secret casino behind a tobacco shop. It was illegal, but it paid. He worked as a roulette stick man and blackjack dealer. It was here in this smoke-filled world that something unexpected happened. Dino started to sing. At first, he just sang for his coworkers, but people began to notice his voice. It was smooth, warm, and full of charm. One of the people who heard him was Ernie McKay, the leader of a local band. He offered Dino a spot in the band. Dino said yes, and his life started to change. He began performing in nightclubs around Ohio using the name Dino Martini. Inspired by opera singer Nino Martini, in 1938, he joined Sammy Watkins, another well-known band leader. Watkins took him on tour and gave him one piece of advice that would shape his future. Change your name to Dean Martin. And so he did. By 1943, Dean was living in New York and performing full-time. But it wasn't easy. He had to work hard to get noticed and he had to keep shaping his image. He wasn't just building a music career. He was building a persona. And that persona would soon become world-famous. As Dean Martin became more well-known, so did his act. He didn't just sing, he performed. He would walk on stage holding a glass of whiskey, always looking relaxed and smooth. He made it seem like he was just there to have a good time. But that act wasn't his own idea. He copied the style from a man named Phil Harris, a performer who built his image around being a hard-drinking woman-chasing showman. Still, Dean made the look his own. His fans loved him for it. He became known as the King of Cool. But what people saw on the outside didn't always match what was happening inside. Dean was quiet. He didn't talk much, especially at parties or big events. In a rare interview with Oriana Falizzi in 1967, he explained why everybody thought I was big-headed and stuck up, and I wasn't, he said. I don't know what to say to people. I didn't know how to speak good English. Even though he had become a star, his struggles with language from childhood still made him feel out of place. That's why he often stayed silent. People misunderstood him. They thought he was cold or distant, but really he was just shy. And that shyness never fully went away. His life was full of contrast. On stage he was confident and funny. Off stage he was quiet and unsure, but he never forgot where he came from. That mix of tough beginnings and inner struggle stayed with him his whole life. Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. In August 1944, Dean Martin's career took a big turn. He met a young comedian named Jerry Lewis at the Belmont Plaza Hotel in New York. Dean was performing at the hotel's Glass Hat Club when he spotted Jerry and said, "Hey, I saw your act. You're a funny kid." That one comment started a partnership that would last for the next 10 years. Dean and Jerry quickly became friends. They joined each other's acts and formed a team. Their first performance together was in Atlantic City at the 500 Club on July 24, 1946. But their debut didn't go well. The crowd didn't laugh, and the club owner, Skinny D'Amato, warned them they'd be fired if the next show wasn't better. So, they rushed to the alley behind the club and came up with a new plan. Jerry would act like a clumsy busboy while Dean tried to sing. Jerry would drop dishes, cause chaos, and Dean would throw bread rolls at him. It was wild, silly, and funny, and the audience loved it. This new act changed their careers. They did slapstick, crack jokes, and made up scenes on the spot. They didn't care about the crowd. They performed for each other, and that's what made people laugh the most. The act grew bigger. They got shows all along the East Coast. Their biggest early gig was at the Copacabana in New York. They became a hit. In 1948, they made their TV debut on the first episode of The Ed Sullivan Show, then called The Toast of the Town, performing alongside big names like Rogers and Hammerstein. To improve their act even more, they hired young writers Norman Lear and Ed Simmons. These writers helped them move from nightclubs to radio and film. In 1949, they signed a movie deal with Paramount for My Friend Irma, where they served as comic relief. But the deal came with freedom. Their agent, Abby Gresseller, made sure they could make one movie a year through their own company, York Productions. On top of that, they kept full control over their club shows, records, radio, and TV appearances. This helped them earn millions. In his book, Dean and Me, Jerry Lewis wrote, Dean was one of the great comic geniuses of all time. Their friendship was deep. Jerry was even best man when Dean got remarried in 1949. But behind the laughs, cracks were forming. When the laughter started to leaving Jerry Lewis fade. Despite their success, things weren't perfect. Critics started to complain that their movies were too similar. Dean got tired of playing the same role in every film. He wanted more. He started putting less energy into their performances. While shooting Three Ring Circus in 1954, a photo was published on the cover of Look magazine. It featured Jerry Lewis and actress Sherry North, but Dean had been cut out of the picture. That was the last straw. According to their publicity manager, Jack Keller, Dean stormed onto the set holding the magazine. He threw it in Keller's face and cursed him out. Jerry Lewis remembered Dean's mood changing. One day, Dean said, "Anytime you want to call it quits, just let me know." The fun was gone. Dean didn't feel like part of the show anymore. He said later, "Why the hell should I come in on time? There's not a damn thing for me to do." He felt like a background act, not an equal partner. In Three Ring Circus, Dean didn't even sing until 35 minutes into the film. And when he did, it was an old tune. It's a big, wide, wonderful world sung to animals. The partnership that once felt magical now felt one-sided. Dean stayed professional and worked until the contract ended. But the breakup came on July 25, 1956, exactly 10 years after they first teamed up. Dean walked away quietly, but with his head held high. Life with the Rat Pack. After parting ways with Jerry Lewis, Dean didn't slow down. He focused on his singing and acting career and soon became a big name in Las Vegas. There he joined a group of entertainers known as the Rat Pack. The crew included Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Joey Bishop, and Peter Lafford. They were known for their classy, party-filled lifestyle, late nights, laughter, and liquor. But while the group loved the wildlife, Dean wasn't exactly like them. To outsiders, Dean looked like the wildest of them all. Sinatra once joked, he's got a tan because he found a bar with a skylight. But that wasn't true. In real life, Dean wasn't much of a partier. While the rest of the pack stayed out until morning, Dean was often the first to leave. He liked doing things his way. Tom Drean, a comedian who opened for Sinatra, said that Dean's quiet style often annoyed Frank. But over time, Sinatra respected him more because of it. Dean wasn't trying to fit in. He did what felt right for him. Dean and Frank had a deep friendship. Dean's daughter Diana once said, "To watch them on stage together was brilliant because you could see the love in their eyes, the respect for each other." Their bond wasn't just for show. Their families were close, too. They were more like brothers than just co-stars. But even close friendships can be tested. The mob, the drinks, and the act behind the man Dean Martin may have become a smooth Hollywood icon, but his past was far from clean. Before fame, he had worked as a bootlegger and even fought in bare-knuckle boxing matches. So when he started performing for mob-connected crowds alongside the Rat Pack, he wasn't shaken like others. He had already seen the darker side of life. While Frank Sinatra had deep ties with the mob, and most of the Rat Pack stayed polite and quiet around gangsters, Dean didn't play by their rules. After one performance, a group of mobsters came up to him and said, "We want to thank you for helping us out." Dean didn't smile. He simply looked them straight in the eye and replied, "No, I did it for Frank," and walked away. That bold moment showed Dean's past hadn't left him weak. It made him fearless. Dean also had a public image that made him look like a heavy drinker. He was almost always seen with a whiskey glass in hand on stage. Fellow Rat Pack member Sammy Davis Jr. once joked, "If this don't straighten my hair, nothing will." But in truth, the glass held Martinelli's apple juice. It was all part of the act. Dean's slurred speech and tipsy manner were fake. That his backup singer, Patty Gribbo, said it was just showbiz. Even Jerry Lewis backed that up in an interview. Dean himself once told the Saturday Evening Post that he drank about 1/10 as much as I pretend to. Speaking of which, Dean Martin's charm wasn't just in his voice. It was in how effortless he seemed on The Dean Martin Show. When NBC offered him his own variety show in the mid-1960s, Dean agreed, but only on his own terms. He told them he would work only on Sundays, didn't want to rehearse, and wanted to own the show after it aired once. NBC said yes. And did you know that Dean didn't attend rehearsals? Instead, he sent a stand-in to go through the entire routine with dancers and guests. Sometimes, if there wasn't a football game on TV, Dean would watch the rehearsal on a monitor from his dressing room. But once the cameras rolled, Dean was there, smooth, relaxed, and completely in control. That show, The Dean Martin Show, ran from 1965 to 1974 and pulled in 40 million viewers. People loved how natural he seemed. Dean once explained, "The reason this show is a hit is that it's me up there on that screen. It ain't nothing phony. That's really me." He became so cool that even Elvis Presley looked up to him. Although Elvis had a tense relationship with singers like Sinatra, he admired Dean. Dean was one of Elvis's singing idols in the early 1950s. Elvis even sang Dean's hit, "Everybody Loves Somebody," at a concert with Dean sitting in the audience. Dean may not have been a reader, but he loved comic books. In fact, the only full book he ever read was Black Beauty. He once said, "If you have luck, you don't have to be smart." That line matched his easygoing image perfectly. He read comics well into adulthood. One of the few times he was starstruck was when he met Bob Kane, the man who created Batman. Dean even starred in his own comic series with Jerry Lewis. Their series, The Adventures of Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, ran for 40 issues between 1952 and 1957. A quiet star with a heavy heart, Dean faced tragedy in 1987 when his son, Dean Paul Martin, died in a plane crash. It shattered him. He pulled back from many things, including his friendship with Sinatra, and even walked out on their tour. That was when the distance began. Tom Dries later said this was the moment the two men started to drift apart. Dean had lost a piece of himself, but in time, they made up. They didn't let that rift last forever. After Dean died, Frank Sinatra gave a touching tribute. He said, "Dean has been like the air I breathe, always there, always close by. He was my brother, not by blood, but by choice." Even with all the success, the TV shows, and the records, Dean Martin remained humble. He never chased attention. In 1965, he launched The Dean Martin Show, a variety program where he sang, joked, and always appeared relaxed. The show became a hit because of his easygoing charm. He made it look effortless. From 1974 to 1984, he hosted the Dean Martin Celebrity Roast, where stars, comedians, and even politicians were teased in good fun. It became another fan favorite. Dean stayed active, performing on stages, in nightclubs, and recording music. By the end of his career, he had appeared in 85 films and TV shows and sold over 12 million records in the United States alone, and over 50 million worldwide. His voice became part of American culture, with songs like That's Amore swaying on. Songs like Everybody Loves Somebody and Ain't That a Kick in the Head are still played today. Dean Martin gave the world laughter, music, and unforgettable memories. But behind all of that charm and success, he carried more weight than most people ever knew, much of it tied closely to his personal life. Dean's first love also marked the beginning of a large family. He married for the first time in 1941, choosing Elizabeth and Betty MacDonald as his bride. She was his first love and the woman who helped him build his family during the early years of his career. After their wedding, Dean and Betty lived together in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, and not long after, they began having children. Their first child, Craig, was born in 1941. Claudia followed in 1944, then Gail in 1945, and Diana in 1948. That made 4 children in total, 1 boy and 3 girls. Despite building a family together, the marriage did not last. After 8 years together, they decided to go their separate ways in 1949. Dean won custody of all 4 children, while Betty moved to the San Francisco area after the divorce. She stayed out of the spotlight and passed away in 1989. Although her time with Dean ended early, she had been there during the crucial period when he was still building his name. She helped raise the first half of the large family he would later become known for, and their children remained close to Dean even after the split. Soon after Betty left his life, Dean's world changed again with someone who would become much more than just his second wife, the woman who stood by him for 24 years. Only 1 week after his divorce from Betty was finalized, Dean married again. His second wife was Jean Beager, a model and former Orange Bowl queen. They married on September 1, 1949, at the home of a famous Hollywood club owner, with Jerry Lewis serving as Dean's best man. Jean had met Dean the year before on New Year's Eve at a club in Miami. At the time, she didn't even know who Dean or Jerry was. As she later told biographer Nick Tosches, "We locked eyes and I knew. We just fell madly in love." Together, Dean and Jean had 3 children, Dean Paul Jr. in 1951, Richie in 1953, and Gina in 1956. With 4 children from his first marriage, Jean became stepmother to a big family. In total, they raised 7 children. Dean often joked about his growing household during his comedy routines, once saying, "I've got 7 kids. The 3 words you hear most around my house are hello, goodbye, and I'm pregnant." From the outside, Dean and Jean's life looked glamorous. They were one of Hollywood's most famous couples. During their marriage, Dean rose to the top as a singer, actor, and Las Vegas headliner, and he became part of the legendary Rat Pack alongside Frank Sinatra. But despite the success, nothing lasted forever. On December 10, 1969, Jean released a statement announcing their separation. The divorce became official in 1972 after 24 years together, with Dean being the one who filed. When asked about it, he delivered another classic line, saying, "I know it's the gentlemanly thing to let the wife file, but then everybody knows I'm no gentleman." Even after the divorce, Dean and Jean stayed connected, especially when tragedy later struck their family. Dean did not remain single for long. In 1973, the same year his divorce from Jean was finalized, he married for the 3rd time. His new wife was Catherine Hahn, a Beverly Hills salon receptionist. They were introduced by a family friend and soon decided to marry. Their wedding was grand and filled with Hollywood stars, including Frank Sinatra. Despite the lavish ceremony, the marriage was short-lived. Dean and Catherine stayed together for only 3 years before divorcing in 1976. They did not have children together, but Dean adopted Catherine's daughter, Sasha, and treated her as his own. After this marriage ended, Dean decided he was done with marriage and never married again during the final 19 years of his life. Catherine remained his last wife. Interestingly, after his split from Catherine, Dean reconnected with Jean. Although they never remarried, they spent time together, especially following a devastating loss that brought them closer once more. In 1987, tragedy struck when Dean's son, Dean Paul Martin Jr., died in a military jet crash at just 35 years old. Dean was devastated, and the loss changed him deeply. This heartbreaking event strengthened the bond between Dean and Jean. While they had remained friendly after their divorce, their connection grew stronger as Jean stood by him through his grief. Many say Dean was never quite the same again after losing his son. Jean and Dean stayed close until Dean's death in 1995 from complications related to lung cancer. On Christmas Day, the world lost a legend, and Jean lost the man she once called the love of her life. Jean never remarried and lived quietly in Beverly Hills. She passed away in 2016 at the age of 89 after a long battle with cancer. Their son Richie Martin, a musician, had died earlier that same year in August 2016. Although Dean and Jean's love story ended in divorce, their bond endured until the very end. Despite Dean Martin's image as a devoted family man, not everything behind the scenes was perfect. Years later, affairs, rumors, and one explosive secret came to light. A shocking claim emerged in the memoir of Sandra Lansky, the daughter of famous mobster Meyer Lansky. Sandra alleged that she had an affair with Dean Martin while he was still married to Jean, and not just at any time, but while Jean was pregnant with their daughter, Gina. In her book, Sandra wrote, "I had never seen anything like Dean Martin's masculinity. We made love 6 times in a night that wouldn't stop. I counted. She added that Dean wanted to save her every moment and that they would drink Coke between rounds. They had what she called an unspoken pact to never talk about their personal lives during the affair. Sandra said she didn't even know Dean's wife was pregnant at the time. The public never saw this side of Dean. Most fans believed his image, the cool, charming star who was a good husband and father. As Lee Hale, musical director of The Dean Martin Show, once said, Dean's viewers knew he was a good husband and father, and the booze and broads jokes were just part of the act. But Sandra's story gave people a glimpse into a different Dean. A man who, despite all his charm and humor, had his own secrets and made mistakes along the way. He was his final years never the same again. Dean Martin may have looked calm on the outside, but those close to him saw something change after the death of his son. According to author William Keck, Dean was suffering from more than just grief. He was carrying a broken heart. In his memoir, When You Step Upon a Star, Cringeworthy Confessions of a Tabloid Bad Boy, Keck shared how Dean's final years were full of sadness. He explained that even though Dean still smiled and joked with those around him, the spark in him had faded. It wasn't just the loss. It was the kind of pain that never really goes away. Keck told Fox News that Dean would often tell him, "I'll be back on that stage one day. You'll see me." But deep down, it was clear he was done. He had no plans to perform again. His heart just wasn't in it anymore. People around him noticed this, too. Close friend and impressionist Rich Little said it best. Once he lost his son, that was the end of him. That was a big part of him that died and never recovered. Those words painted the picture clearly. Dean had lost more than a son. He had lost himself. According to Jerry Lewis, that's when Dean really started drinking. Jerry said simply, Dean let himself go. The performance stopped being an act. The pain took over. He didn't talk much about it. He didn't seek attention. But those who had known him for years saw the difference. Dean Martin, the man who once lit up every room, now just wanted quiet. He pulled away from the spotlight and slowly faded out of public life. His final goodbye. In 1993, Dean's health. His final goodbye started to decline. He had been a heavy smoker all his life, and that finally caught up with him. He was diagnosed with lung cancer at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Doctors told him surgery could help him live longer. But Dean refused treatment. By early 1995, he had retired from public life. He stayed at home in Beverly Hills, away from cameras, fans, and the stage he once loved. That same year on Christmas Day, Dean Martin died of acute respiratory failure caused by emphysema. He was 78 years old. His death was felt deeply across the world. In Las Vegas, a city he helped make famous, the lights on the Strip were dimmed in his honor. It was one final salute to a man who had given so much joy, music, and laughter. Dean was buried at the Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles. His crypt carries a simple yet powerful message, one line from his most famous song, "Everybody Loves Somebody Sometime." William Keck, who had spoken to Dean in his final years, attended the private VIP funeral. Many celebrities came to say goodbye, but the moment that stayed with everyone came in the middle of the service. The room went dark. Everything was still. And then Rosemary Clooney, a close friend and aunt of actor George Clooney, began to sing "Everybody Loves Somebody." Keck described the moment as surreal. In a room full of stars, it was a simple song from a friend that captured everything. A quiet, personal goodbye to a man the world knew as a legend, but who in the end was just a father, a friend, and a man who missed his son. Do you think Dean Martin truly found peace in his final years? Or was he always carrying that heartbreak? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more incredible stories from Hollywood's fascinating history. See you next time.